Hi, I wanted to create a video about and introducing you to IFIO, which is the couples version of IFS, because I couldn't see a huge amount of information on the internet about it. And I also wanted to introduce me to you, just to see if we can perhaps work together. I think it's really important for you to work with a therapist that you get on with and you like. It's a bit like alchemy, and I think it's really important to find a therapist that works with you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am, a little bit about what IFS and IFIO is, and then I will talk a little bit about the process and what happens perhaps in the first session, and finish off with some links to how to find an IFO therapist, and also maybe if you want to do a little bit of homework before you came to see me. So who am I? I am Natasha. I'm a UKCP psychotherapist, and I got interested in IFS years ago and decided to do my levels 1, 2 and 3. And I also did the IFIO training for couples, which I love. So I work at home in Stroud, here in this room. I also work on Zoom. I work with individuals, and I now mostly work with couples. I also do groups, and I run a Stroud IFS informed drop-in, which is I do twice a month, but then monthly, about various, it's a drop-in, and we do various different topics, and there's a meditation and some active listening and sharing. I love IFS and I love IFIO. I live it, I breathe it, I train lots, I'm extensively supervised. I talk about it in my life. My kids roll their eyes every time I mention parts. And I hope you'll really like it too. And finally, I'm organising some workshops with Ramdeep Sembi, who's an IFS therapist, on race, slavery, colonialism from an IFS and UK lens, hopefully this year. So IFIO, what is this? It's the couples version of IFS, and it also works with other dyads, siblings, friends, groups. It was developed by Toni Herbine Blank, and she has a great book out. It's really highly recommended if you want to really dive into it. And she took the premises of IFS and brought it together with Imago couples therapy, and also other systems thinking and neuroscience, and bringing in the autonomic nervous system as well. So, and she's been doing that for years, and there are many IFIO therapists around the world, but we're in short supply, and hopefully there's more being trained all the time. So it's different to usual couples therapy, which is, in my view, often trying to get secure attachment with the other, whereas IFIO is very much, the focus is me getting to know my internal world, and so that I can form an internal secure attachment with myself, so I then can meet with you and have then we can have a self-to-self safe, secure conversation. We're looking for a self-to-part-with-part relationship. So we U-turn and then return to the other, so that we can have a safe connection, self-to-self. We're focused on building an earned sense of attachment. So we start to get to know parts, their vulnerabilities and their needs explicitly. So in IFIO, your job is to find and get to know your system better, and maybe find some self-compassion, and then talk and speak with what happens in your system with your partner. We're changing the conversation that you have with each other. My role is as a process facilitator. I'm not getting so involved in the content. I am helping you form a self to your part connection, what's been showing up in your systems, and stopping you from hearing the other. In this society, we tend to get hooked on the idea that our partner is there to be there totally for us, like our redeemer. And when they're not, we tend to get a bit re-traumatized. For children, it's really essential that they have a loving caregiver that's there for them. But as adults, we're needing to be our own primary caregiver, and our partner is like the icing on the cake. If we expect another person to be there for us at all times, it's a setup. They can't do it. They're going to try and do as best they can, maybe, but it's not their job and they can't do it. They have parts too. And what we find is when we have more compassion for ourselves and we get to know our systems, often we can then, be curious and compassionate to our partner. But if we've got a bit of a deficit and we're not feeling internally compassionate, we're going to have, parts that are going to scheme and demand things from the other. But we can always be here first. So Liz Phillips has a great analogy, which is if we hook ourselves to our partner's speedboat and they get hijacked by a part, we will be whizzing about in the water, and it will get chaotic. Whereas if we can unhook from the speedboat and we can stay grounded on the beach and cheer them on, then this is a totally different way of being. And I really love that analogy. It's really good for everyone if we can unhook. So what would happen if we were in contact in the first session? You're likely to be getting in contact on email, and we'll talk about times and prices and whether we meet here on these sofas or whether we meet online on Zoom or on Skype. I don't have a totally prescriptive order. I really like to hear about what brings you here, what the issue is, what your dilemma is. Do you have a repetitive fight? We have the idea that often it's the content changes, but the process is the same. We tend to get into really familiar fights with our partners. What concerns do you have about coming to see a couples therapist? What fears? And also we'll try and tease out what your goals are. And finally, how do you feel about being different to each other? Which is a really important part of IFIO. About, can I still be me and can you still love me? Is what we're going for. We might chat about things about your family of origin, your children, addiction. Has there been any abuse? Cultural differences? Has there only been betrayal? That sort of thing. Anything that's relevant. I can tell you more about IFS and IFIO, and you can ask me more about how I work or more about me. Or we just dive straight in. It's important you know a few things. So we prioritise the safety of both of you, and it's really important that we don't take sides. I'm curious about your perspectives and recognise the validity of your experience. And I always add that I'm human too. I'm really conscious of my own parts, and I look at them and make sure that they don't get involved in the sessions. I'm monitoring for that. But I am a human being too. I also introduced the concept of the autonomic nervous system, and I have a little diagram back here, which I'll put a link to how you experience the world. Having a knowledge of your own autonomic nervous system is really, really helpful. Am I going into fight? Am I going into flight? Am I going into freeze? Am I looking for, when my partner does this, what happens to me in my body? What, does my heart rate go up? Do I start sort of tensing up? Does my neck go? Do I just want to run out the door? What happens to me when you or when someone does this? I feel like this. What happens to me? This is the essence of IFIO. It's the U-turn before I return to you. The dilemma, the repetitive fight that happens, it's a dance. When my partner does this, I feel this in my body. This is the story I tell myself. This is what I do. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm projecting onto them, what I think they're doing. And then then what do I then do? What is my impulse then? What do I say? What do I do to them? And then we ask the partner, so do you know this part in the other? Okay. So what happens to you in your body? What do you say? What do you say to yourself? What story do you tell yourself? And then what do you do? Back again. Do you know this part in your partner? Okay. So what happens to you in your body? What happens in your autonomic nervous system? What do you say in your head? What story do you tell? And back again. So that's the tracking. So what is the process of IFIO? That was the first session. The process is we spend a while doing this tracking back and forth. And we might do a little bit of individual work with each of you. And then over time, we're learning to help you from your U-turn, return to the other and speak differently. You're sharing how your parts and their vulnerabilities and their needs have come up in relation to what the other has said or done. And then they can listen. You're responsible for your process, but they're hearing the impact of their behaviour or their words. So eventually, I'd like to help you learn courageous communication, speaking vulnerably in front of the other about your experience. And the other is being courageous about putting their protectors aside so that they can really listen to you. It leads us to the world of invitation to connect, to invite someone to help you. So, what is the goal of IFIO? The goal is really moving from protection to connection. Not my phrase, I really like it. Goals depend entirely on you, what you want. Most people want, a deeper connection to sort out why they're fighting. But, very much up to you. But generally, accessing self-energy, getting to know your parts, embodying love and care, changing your conversation so that you can have a safe self-to-self conversation and you can be each other's person, which I just think is really exciting. So what homework can you do? So Tony Herbing-Blank has written this book, but she has also written, there's also some videos on the internet, so Tony Herbing-Blank and Liz Phillips have done some really excellent Spotify and Apple podcasts. If you were to look up IFIO and Liz Phillips and Tony Herbing-Blank, I'm going to suggest looking up the autonomic nervous system. Seth Porges does a really engaging 28 minutes of Nerd Night presentation, which I really like. Looking up something like this, the traffic lights, I'll link it in. Really, if you can keep noticing what your autonomic nervous system state is. Am I, seeking safety in action, or am I seeking safety in disconnect, or am I just in the flow? Am I feeling good and warm and friendly? It's really, really helpful noticing when my partner does this. What do I feel in my body? What stories do I tell? What am I saying to myself about my history and, what am I saying about them? And then what do I then do? So I hope this has been helpful, and hopefully there'll be other videos. Do be in contact. I am really fully booked at the moment, but spaces do come available, and I just hope that this has been useful. Thanks so much. Bye.